What's going on, everybody, and welcome back into the Brenden Schaeffer Fantasy Football channel. Hit subscribe and like on this video if you enjoy fantasy football content. We'll be bringing it to you with frequency during the 2023 NFL season. It's been a lot of mock drafts over the last month here on the channel, and we'll continue to do a few more of those as the season ramps up, beginning Thursday, September 7th, with the Chiefs and the Lions kicking off NFL Week 1. But mock drafts at that point will no longer be relevant. A lot of people doing their real drafts over this Labor Day weekend. I did one of those drafts on Friday night, and I wanted to show you the results of the auction draft that I did on Sleeper, honestly, in order to tell you what not to do if you've got an auction draft coming up this weekend. I'll tell you exactly what I mean by that as we look over the rosters and the way it broke down here in this 12-team PPR league that features deeper lineups than you're used to seeing in probably most of your leagues. 3 wide receivers start in addition to your standard quarterback, tight end, and 2 running back setup. But there are also 2 flex spots as well that are used. And then we see the 5-man bench in addition to that. That's what we are working with a $200 budget in an auction draft. My plan coming into the draft was to try and avoid the pitfall that I often fall into, which is not spending enough of my money aggressively because I'm always trying to save for better values later on in the draft. And, of course, as has often happened, I really failed to adhere to my plan because I just couldn't find values that I wanted when it came to the big-name players that were going off the board. Don't do what I did. That's going to be my best advice coming off the top is don't wait to find the perfect value when the perfect value honestly doesn't exist. And if it does exist and you do find it, you're probably going to find that you just didn't get enough of them to where you spent your full budget. I leave $10 on the table here, as you guys can see with my team here, B Schaeffer 12. Let's go over my roster real quick. I'll talk about what I spent, where I think I'm a little deficient. What I do still like about this team is one that I hope to be able to turn into a winner throughout the course of some good managing during the season. But I'll start at the top with Dak Prescott as my quarterback, $5. This is a league that is 6 points per passing touchdown. I actually like the pick of Dak Prescott for $5 in this format because I kind of wonder, with no Ezekiel Elliott in Dallas, does that Dallas offense, when they get into the red zone, become much more pass-oriented when they approach the goal line? I'd have to think that the answer to that is yes. Tony Pollard, great running back, great receiver out of the backfield, but he's not exactly been the goal line back, or at least having the opportunity to show with the Dallas Cowboys that he can do that as not a smaller running back, but he's not Zeke Elliott sized. So are they going to let him bang inside when it comes to the goal line offense, or are they going to come up with somebody else that can do it? I don't know. The result could be more passing touchdowns for the Dallas offense overall. In terms of a split between pass and run, I think it's going to lean more through the air this year for the Cowboys, which is an advantage if you have a guy that can rack up 6 points per passing TD. So when you compare the $5 spend on Dak Prescott to $30 for Mahomes, to not a super flex league, so no quarterback prices were going to be too out of control. Lamar Jackson commanding 22, Burrow 21, Josh Allen 29, Hurts came in at 26, Justin Herbert always awful 26. That was kind of a Freudian slip. I said awful. I thought it was an awful value at 26 when you could have paid a couple more dollars for one of the really top-tier guys. Trevor Lawrence at 25 felt like kind of a lot, but he's the last guy of a tier. Whereas you see this team here, $1 on Geno Smith. They say, yeah, no big deal. I'm going to just throw the ball with Geno Smith and rack up some touchdowns that way. So kind of a various ways to go about it when it came to the quarterback position. Deshaun Watson is this team's starter for $5. Justin Fields I thought was a good value for $14 relative to what we saw come off the board. But it's also a case where with 6-point passing touchdowns, Fields is going to get a lot of rushing touchdowns. It's a one rare setting where the running quarterback is honestly, it's not a disadvantage by any means. You still get the points, but you're not fully realizing the potential of the 6-point passing touchdowns if your quarterback tends to run it in rather than throw it in. So I kind of like the bump that you get from the more stationary types of quarterbacks like a Dak Prescott, a pure pocket passer type of guy. Kirk Cousins can do well in this format as well because you're getting the benefit of all the passing touchdowns thrown, and the guys who are running it in instead of passing it in, it's not like a bonus like you normally see in fantasy football where a quarterback throws it in 4 points, they run it in 6 points. There's a disparity there. Not in this format, which led me to Dak Prescott, and I feel pretty good about that buy. I like my running backs as well. Breece Hall for 21, I felt like that was a value. Jahmyr Gibbs for 25 was a solid value. I mean, you're paying up for him, but he's a third-round player in a snake draft, so I have no problem with him going for $25, especially because I had money to burn, and it was at that point of the draft that I'm like, goodness gracious, I have to start finding ways to spend this cash. James Cook was another example of that. I just wasn't going to leave the draft without him. It was an overpay at $19, but a really solid guy at RB3. And down here on my bench, we've got Javonte Williams for $7, Zach Charbonnet for 13. That was a case of you're just in a bidding war with this guy over here, Mason. And I thought, okay, I'm throwing 13. If he's going to take it for more than that, then he can take him. But otherwise, I'm getting Zach Charbonnet. And then Devon Achane, I really like for $3. So there's upside at the running back position. I've got 6 guys that I legitimately think could be not only rostered, but put into your lineup in a 12-team league, especially with the extra flex position that we have there. So I really like my running back room, and I would contend that it's the best in the league. There is one team that went very heavily on Tony Pollard and Christian McCaffrey for over $100 combined dollars. They also ended up drafting Jonathan Taylor, which is a little bit risky for $22 when you consider that he may not play this year. They spent $46 on Stephon Diggs, and you see where they had to have some issues elsewhere with Allen Lazard, Donovan Peoples-Jones combining for $7 as wide receiver 2 and wide receiver 3. And then the bench is just a bunch of $1 guys. But they did grab Deuce Vaughn, which I think was auto-drafted, so kind of fortunate there. If you're a Deuce Vaughn guy, and it's kind of the handcuff to Pollard in some ways, so don't have an issue with that. But you can see what a heavy expenditure on like 3 names here, Pollard, McCaffrey, and Diggs for about $150. That's going to leave you lean on the rest of your roster, especially when you go get Jonathan Taylor, who's not going to be playing for 4 weeks. So that's going to be interesting to see how that team navigates it. But in my case, I was thinking spend on guys in the 20s and 30s and just load up on them. And I just wasn't able to get as many of them as I should have. I failed in this draft, and that's why I'm broadcasting this and telling you, hey, guys, don't do what I did. When you're under the gun and in an auction draft, it can be difficult to execute the way you want to. Come in with a game plan and stick to it. Chris Olave for $31, fine value there. And Mark Andrews for 31, I felt really good about, especially with Travis Kelce going for 54. It's full point PPR league. Love getting Mark Andrews at the value. I have continued to talk about him on these videos. I may just do a video specifically why we're targeting Mark Andrews as aggressively as we are. Something that I could break down for the channel if I get a little bit of time tomorrow. But I like the guys that I got. I just didn't get enough of them in that round 3, round 4 range, right? Like Gibbs is a round 3 player. Breece Hall is a round 4 player. Olave, maybe late 2nd round, early 3rd round player. Mark Andrews, same thing. 3rd round in a lot of leagues. Probably should be going in the 2nd in my estimation. That's good. You're getting value there. You don't get a 1st round pick, but you get an extra one within the top kind of 3 rounds as a result of the way we drafted in the auction. But behind that, we just didn't have enough like legitimate depth at wide receiver. We immediately vault into the rookies, which I'm going to stand by the fact that I got values for all these guys. Smith and Jigba for $6, Quentin Johnson for $5, Jordan Addison for $10, and then Jameson Williams. It was to the point in the draft where it's like, I'm not generally drafting Jameson Williams to stash on my bench, but I need somebody with some wide receiver upside for later in the season because I clearly didn't draft enough of it. So despite the 6-game suspension for JMO, I'm kind of hoping that he can be a flex for me after he gets integrated in Week 7 of the NFL season. And probably looking at throwing some running backs in my flex. Like Week 1, Smith and Jigba is a little banged up. Does he even play? Quentin Johnson is the wide receiver 4 on the depth chart, at least to start the season. I don't think it'll stay that way by any means. Remember, BZ Johnson once was ahead of Justin Jefferson on the depth chart. That didn't last long either. But I can't plug Quentin Johnson in my lineup Week 1, so I'm probably looking to go Addison and Smith and Jigba. Hopefully he's active, because if he's not, I don't have another wide receiver. I'll have to pull somebody off of waivers, use the IR to my advantage. Because James Williams can't play. $7, great value if he ends up hitting later on in the season. But I may not be in the playoffs to enjoy him because of the fact that I just didn't spend aggressively enough. Let Gabe Davis go for $20. Let DJ Moore go for $22 was just a huge mistake. Keenan Allen was a guy I was in on. There's no reason not to throw the extra couple of bucks there, because worst comes to worst, you don't end up spending 7 plus 13 plus 7 plus 3 plus 4 plus 3 on your bench. That's like 30 some odd dollars, close to $40 on my bench. I can't use that value in my lineup. So get a couple of targets on your bench. Like what I do like about this is entire team is full of guys that I'm targeting in drafts. It's really nobody that I reached on or I clicked on and didn't want to have. I like all the players that I have. I just don't have enough bona fide guys, and that's going to cost me in the early weeks of the season. My hope with this roster is that some of the rookies like Charbonnet, A-Chain, Addison, Quentin Johnson, Smith, and Jigba, Jahmyr Gibbs should hopefully at least be someone we can rely upon in our lineup. But all the other rookies that are a little bit questionable in various ways is that they pop off to begin the season. Dalton Kincaid, same thing. $4 for my bench as a second tight end that I didn't really need, but I was just looking for guys that had upside at that point because I had money to burn. I ended up with $10 just sitting in my pocket and couldn't do anything with it. I did neglect to draft a defense because you don't need to draft a defense. I grabbed Richardson instead. What'll I do? I'm just going to kind of wait and see what happens here. And if I don't have an injury like Smith and Jigba or Devon A-Chain's a little banged up, if I don't have an injury that I can stash on IR, I probably just have to drop Richardson and just let that happen. Or maybe I can pull off a 2-for-1 trade somewhere. Auction drafts can lead to trades very quickly after the draft. Unlike a snake draft, it doesn't really make sense to trade right away in that. But in an auction, you can have a guy who, they like, crap, I didn't get enough depth, and so I'm going to be willing to make a move right away, whereas you wouldn't be willing to do that in other formats. But I'm going to have to do something to get a defense. But guess what? It's September 2nd. It's not September 7th, nor is it September 10th. On September 9th at night, Saturday night, I could pick up a defense. Don't do it earlier than you have to. See how things play out, and you might be able to stash an upside quarterback like Anthony Richardson. What if he runs for 150 yards week 1 and we find out, he's just going to be that guy? People are going to be clamoring for him, and you can trade him. You can find value for guys that you stash late on your bench. But this is very clear. Don't listen to this video or watch this video and go, oh man, this guy really thinks he nailed this draft. I'm telling you I didn't. I'm labeling the video with the title that I labeled it with for a reason, because you don't want this to happen to you in your mock drafts, or your real drafts, rather. Like, do I like the players that I have? Sure. But to have Jordan Addison as your wide receiver 2, I like him, but we don't know what he's going to be yet. We don't know how long the integration is going to take. Quentin Johnson, he shouldn't be started week 1 in a 12-team league, but I'm going to have to probably do it. Either him or Smith and Jigba. Luckily, I feel good about the flex spots being running backs with James Cook, Javonte Williams. Maybe we go Zach Charbonnet if we're feeling frisky, because we don't really know what the Javonte role is going to be in Denver right away, but he'll split time with P. Ryan and should give us enough touches to get you some points in your flex. But I typically am looking to be wide receiver in my flex, especially in PPR. So it kind of burns me that I wasn't able to execute the way that I wanted to in this mock draft. So I'm doing this video to say, guys, learn from this experience. I've got plenty more mocks left to go. I'm basically doing real fantasy drafts every day until Thursday. So I've got more opportunities to make up for this. What I do like is a lot of the guys that I have targeted in the 6th through 10th round. I'm talking Smith and Jigba, Johnston, James Cook, Addison, Javonte, Charbonnet, A-Chain, Kincaid. I'm targeting all those guys. I'm not really targeting JMO too much because you can't, in many league formats, stash a guy on your bench for 6 weeks. Most leagues don't let you put a suspended player on IR. Mine does not. I'm the commissioner. I made it that way. I just don't think that would be fair. So he's not generally a target, but everybody else is like a pretty big target of mine in round 6 through 10. And I ended up with all those guys, which is impossible to do in a snake draft, because in round 6, you're choosing like, okay, when I come back around, Javonte or James Cook's not going to be there. I got to pick which one I want. Or Jordan Addison and Smith and Jigba are not going to be there at that portion of the 7th round. I got to take the one that I want. Quentin Johnson, kind of the same story. You're not going to be able to get all these guys. So kind of fun to do in a lower buy-in type of league like this one, where I just said, I'm going to get all my targets. I'm going to out-muscle everybody when it comes to the bench. I'm sure nobody spent as much on their bench as I did. Just top to bottom, I was spending 7, 13, 7 on some of those bench guys. And maybe it comes back to bite me, or maybe I'm able to wait long enough to find trades that will help me later on, making it a more robust lineup. I have to be patient to do that, though, because right now, frankly, the guys that I would be able to trade are mostly the rookies, and they aren't appreciated by the league as much as I value these guys, because we haven't seen it. Once they're able to show on the field, you might get some more interest from your league mates. But for now, I have to sit tight, which I don't like to do. I like to be working the trade wire immediately after a draft, especially an auction draft. And I frankly, I don't think I'm going to get fair value on the offers for players, because they'll look and say, oh, you got Smith and Jigba for $6. Like, that's not anybody that's very valuable. James Conner went for $6. Yeah, that's great. I just have a belief in all of these players to where I want to hold on to them long enough that they do establish some trade value. So do I like my team? I like the players. I need one more guy like Keenan Allen in the wide receiver spot than I had. One more, even a Tyler Lockett or a Christian Kirk. Trevor's team here, he did exactly what I say you should try to do. Madison and Gibson, PPR, they're both going to have roles. Gibson is the pass-catching back. Madison is just the full workhorse. He maybe overspent on Patrick Mahomes, but he was making it a concerted effort to spend his money. He gets a stud in Jamar Chase. That's going to help you guarantee to spend your money. He gets good value for Lockett, Christian Kirk, and Hollywood Brown for $5. I mean, great value in your second flex. Goddard, $11, just gets you a top 8 tight end. Christian Kirk for $12 is just going to plug in, and Mike Williams for $25. He had money to spend. Zay Flowers for $10. I should have upbid him, but I told him I was not going to because he let me have JSN for $6, and I thought that was nice of him at the time. Little did I know, money wasn't going to really be a problem for me. So kind of anticipate and read the draft as it's going. That's a mistake that I made in this one that I'm wishing I would have been a little more diligent about. But those things happen. Try to learn from them when they do, and don't give up on a season because of a draft that didn't go the way you wanted it to. There's still a lot of football to be played. Hell, all of the football is yet to be played. So I'm in a position where I got players that I like. I think I'm going to have a really hard time getting out of the first 4 weeks with an even record. If I can go 2-2 through 4 weeks, as Breece Hall ramps up, as Gibbs gets acclimated to the NFL, Smith and Jigba, Quentin Johnson acclimated to the NFL, James Cook, if he has a role like we hope he will with Buffalo this year, Addison as a rookie gets acclimated, and Javonte coming off the injury, Charbonnet acclimated, A-Chain both acclimated as a rookie. And the injury, like we're going to have a hard time in the early weeks of this season, but if we can go 2-2 through 4 weeks, and then we kind of see what our rookies are all about and can start to kind of get involved in trades based on what other teams are needing. Hopefully we stay healthy, knock on wood. Like at that point, I feel like we're going to feel a lot better about our season and the potential, but it could also be kind of a slow build where we're just having to survive those early weeks. So I'm kind of curious, what do you think of my draft? Obviously, you can rip me if you want, but I wouldn't be making this video if I weren't trying to highlight the deficiencies of this roster. I like the players, but I went too much on the bench and prioritizing out-muscling my opponents. Be ready to out-muscle them for, $7 to $13 on a couple guys on your bench, and then just you go $1, $1, $1, $1 is what you need to do at the very end, and that probably allows you to bid a little more on a Tyler Lockett, bid a little more on a Jerry Jeudy. I mean, some of the values that go off the board. Cody's team here took advantage of those. Debo for 23, McLaurin for 12, Jeudy for 7. Yeah, he's injured, but $7 for a guy that you probably get back week 3 or week 4. It's a value to that. Michael Pittman, $7. Drake London, $16. He got a bunch of the gross guys on gross offenses, but when you look at the depth that brought his team, I really feel like he can throw Brandon Ayuk in his lineup instead of some of those guys. Deontay Johnson in his lineup instead of some of those guys. Just a really, really good top-to-bottom roster that didn't end up leaving money on the table the way that I did. So there's a lot of different ways to do it. I want to highlight this one over here. Justin Jefferson for 62, Cooper Kupp for 45, Amon-Ra St. Brown for 45. We know the Kupp injury could be a little risky, but if that's like a trio, there's nobody in this league that's going to be even close to that. And he's got Calvin Ridley as his 4. Now, yeah, he's sacrificed, but who's to say that you can't have KJ Osborne have a decent wide receiver 3 season for Minnesota? Or maybe he pushes for wide receiver 2 snaps over my guy, Jordan Addison. Jalen Hyatt, maybe he's just the wide receiver 1 for the Giants, wearing number 13 like Odell. Like, there's a world in which the guys that he got off the bench can end up helping him and filling into his flex spots the way that he's going to need. Jalen Warren, Ezekiel Elliott, if you're talking PPR for $6, that is a brilliant zero RB build. And spend $1 at quarterback on Geno Smith. So, like, there are different ways to approach auction drafts. I almost wish I did it the way this guy did, getting 4 absolutely stud wide receivers for about $175 and just going, I'll figure out the rest later. I don't even care. Picking 2 pass-catching running backs in Warren and Elliott, guys who are going to be third down backs for their teams. Elliott's probably getting the goal line for the Patriots. Should he be starting on most 12-team leagues? No, not as an RB2, but in this build, you can live with it because what he was able to do. And Jawan Johnson's a touchdown equity guy for the Saints. So I actually really like that draft and wish I had implemented a little bit more of that in my strategy. But let me know what you think of it as you look over the draft board, how you feel about the different teams in the league and what they were able to accomplish. I don't know. I feel like it was a draft that I was very close to getting exactly what I wanted out of it, and I just fell a little bit short. So keep in mind when you're doing these drafts, find the plan that you want to implement and then try your best to stick to it. Don't end up like me, really scrambling and going, yeah, I've got a lot of upside, but do I even have a lineup for week one? It's going to be really interesting. If this league goes in a direction that's interesting at all, I'll kind of explain as the season goes along some of the things that are happening. Nobody cares about my fantasy team, but I do it to kind of demonstrate, and I'm going to talk about some of my teams as we go along, because when I make trades, I want people to see, like, okay, this is the type of trade that makes sense to make if you're in this position with a robust running back room or a deep wide receiver room, but you need to find running backs somewhere. Like, we're trying to help people implement trade strategy in this video, not this video, but this channel as well as we go along. So that's some of the stuff that you can expect to see on the Brenden Schaeffer Fantasy Football channel. Check out the draft board. Let me know in the comments below if you like some of the great values that happened across the board here. Why didn't I get more of them? Feel free to rip me from my draft. My team's right here. I feel like I did a decent enough job, but man, I sure fell short when it came to leaving money on the table. Instead of having one more solid wide receiver too, that could have allowed the rest of my roster to slide into place. I really kind of fell short on this one. So go ahead and rip me in the comments, but hit subscribe on this video if you enjoyed the process behind fantasy drafting and finding the ways to the best teams that we can find, because that's what it's going to be all about on the Brenden Schaeffer Fantasy Football channel as we go along. Thank you guys so much for watching this video, and we'll talk to you next time on the channel. Peace.